All right, that gets us down to public hearing number one. It's the acquisition of a permanent easement on the property identified as the North Pleasant Valley Desalter Facility. Resolution necessity. Do we have a staff report on that?
Yes, I'll be
Dave,
giving
you
that,
want to take
Mayor.
that,
Thank
please?
you. This item is a public hearing to consider a resolution of necessity for a permanent easement for the Desalter project. On the screen is an overview of the Desalter site and the required pipelines for the project. The site, as you well know, is on the northwest corner of Lewis Road, Somas Road, and Las Posas Road. And there's several pipelines that are required as a part of the project. Primarily the blue pipeline shown here is the raw water feed line coming from wells A and B, and the pipeline going from those wells east towards the project site. The pipeline shown in green is what we're going to call the Pleasant Valley Mutual Water Company's brine line. So they have a desalter plant, small-scale plant planned for their site over here on North Las Posas Road, North Ponderosa, above Las Posas. And we have a separate agreement that Council's already approved with PV Mutual for the city to effectuate the design and construction of their brine line at full reimbursed cost by PV Mutual. But the design and construction of the pipeline is being coordinated with the design and construction of our raw water feed line. So those two pipelines coming together on Antonio and then heading east on Mar Vista, and the alignment that we're moving forward with in design continues across, avoiding the school access road area, coming across the northern portion of the city's library site, across the green area there, across, I'm drawing a blank on the street name now, the street that accesses Rancho Campana, and heading east, proposed to go across the northern portion of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, call that the church, from here on out to the Desalter site. So that's the layout of what we're talking about tonight, and get in a little bit closer, showing those two pipelines coming, the green and the blue, and here near the Desalter site, we also need to drain the storm water off the project, and the proposed alignment for that is a storm drain pipeline, and that flows the other way from east to west from the site, again proposed going across the northern portion of the church parking lot and tying into an existing storm drain. So there's a total of 3 pipelines that are proposed to come across here, and that would the idea is to put that within a 30-foot easement across the northern portion of the church's property, which is parking lot. And we have a current appraisal for that easement valued at $61,000. An easement purchase offer has been made to the church at that valuation amount. So some of the particulars of the easement includes terms and conditions specific to the location. I mentioned the 30-foot. It would be a permanent easement, cover the construction, and then also the use and any future access needs for maintenance would be allowed within this 30-foot permanent easement across the northern portion of the church parking lot. For pipeline construction, the easement document in terms of condition includes restrictions on construction to be weekdays only, so not impacting the church parking lot on the weekends, with construction between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. We will endeavor to make the property as usable as possible on the weekends. There will be times when the construction will be active during the week and open trench remaining over the weekend, so there will be portions that won't be usable. However, as the project continues, we'll make best efforts to make the area as usable as possible. And just anecdotally, in observing over the last year that we've been in process on this parking lot is sees light use. From time to time on the weekends there is use going on there, but primarily on the front southern portion of the parking lot, and this northern portion is relatively rarely used. We'll also include a provision that after the construction is completed, we will be seal coating and restriping that northern portion of the parking lot that will be excavated into and the pipelines installed, so that'll all be repaved and put back into new condition with seal coating and restriping. The easement also includes ingress and egress during construction and into the future if required. And then also restoration of the property, the entire property after construction and any future use. And essentially what that means is that anything that needs to be restored because of the city's activity, whether it's the original construction or follow-up, anything that needs to be restored, say if it had to be removed, a piece of curb, or if it actually inadvertently got damaged, the city would be restoring the property to its existing condition. So I mentioned a purchase offer has been made to the church. Actually, it's been over a year ago. The first initial offer was made, and that was not accepted, and contacts and negotiations with the church did not go anywhere on moving forward with that easement purchase offer. An updated offer was submitted to the church just this past July. City performed an updated appraisal for the easement valuation at the $61,000. So that had been offered, that easement purchase offer had been submitted in July, and that has not been accepted. We did look at alternative pipeline alignments and investigated those, one of them being routing the pipelines up and around on the north side of the church. So the three pipelines there. It does require, instead of a storm drain pipe, it would need to be a concrete box drain. There's an existing earthen ditch, and it's just on the north side of the church. It's actually in school district property that would require a concrete box drain to be installed where the ditch is. And our estimate for additional costs for design and construction is about $300,000. This is a less direct alignment, obviously, not as ideal, with significant disruption to the high school, with the construction going up into the Camino Alvarez access road and across. This is the sole access driveway to this back eastern parking lot for the high school. There'd be significant impacts during construction on that access. And then also, this would likely have an impact on, or could have an impact on the Desalter's overall schedule. We're currently in design for the original alignment with the pipeline work to be completed in design and under construction in a time frame that will match up with when the site needs, when the Desalter needs the raw water feed line, especially, is the critical path item there. So there will be a need for easement acquisition from the high school, items that could impact schedule. Another alternative alignment was to go down and around the south side of the church property, coming down Camino Alvarez with the raw water line and the PV Mutual Bryan line into Las Posas Road, and then up into the Desalter site from the south. And this estimated additional cost at around $700,000. It is a significant increase in the amount of pipeline needed. Challenging alignment, especially when we get into Las Posas Road. Obviously, it's much less direct than straight across the church property as proposed. Again, it'd still be disruption to the high school. The concrete box drain work would still need to happen in there, and access would need to be taken from the high school property. Again, likely effects on the schedule of the Desalter on getting these pipelines to the site when they're needed. And then I was mentioning it's very problematic to even find a location for these pipelines in Las Posas Road. It's quite a few utilities out there. Callegas Water District has a pipeline out there, and all the other utilities are there. So problematic even finding a spot for that. So the best pipeline easement location is as planned, directly across the northern portion of the church property. Most direct, and it is less costly, less disruptive, and also will be minimal to no impact on the Desalter schedule. Since no agreement on the purchase of the easement has been reached, a resolution of necessity is required for acquisition of the easement. And that requires this public hearing that was noticed and is being held tonight, August 28th, 2019. And the resolution must contain certain findings, including public interest, convenience, and necessity require the Desalter project. The Desalter project is planned and located in a manner that will be most compatible with the greatest public good and least private injury, and the permanent easement is necessary for the Desalter project. Now it's time for comments by the city attorney regarding the next steps.
Yes, we were contacted by Ryan Wallace, who's an attorney for the LDS Church. I believe he reached out to Robert McDowell yesterday, and we've been having contact with him since that time. He had indicated that the LDS was requesting an additional language be added to the resolution of necessity, and they would then consider that in terms of whether it was acceptable or not. So Mr. McDowell drafted this up, sent it off to them. It was in your red folder. It's on page A2, and it's in section 3 of the resolution of necessity, and I'll just read it. It's a couple lines here. It's in red line. It says the authorized users will fully restore the real property after the initial construction of the facilities, and will also fully restore the real property subsequent to any and all future exercise of rights that impact the real property. So that language was sent to Mr. Wallace, and he indicated that he would be checking with the LDS Church to make sure it was acceptable, which he did. I received an email back from Mr. Wallace this afternoon indicating that the LDS Church was now agreeable with the resolution of necessity. So it appears, based on at least the exchange of emails, that we should be ready to move forward on this matter. So in terms of next steps, Mr. McDowell and I will be working on any revisions that might be necessary to a proposed easement and an agreement that, if, assuming it's acceptable to the LDS Church and they execute that, the easement and the agreement, then the easement would be recorded, and there would be a payment made to them of some $61,000. If for some reason we are unable to reach agreement with the LDS Church with respect to the easement language or the agreement, then we would need to initiate an eminent domain action. Based upon the communications with Mr. Wallace, it sounds at this point that we're optimistic that we should be able to proceed with a voluntary acquisition without the need for court action. However, it's my recommendation that you proceed with the suggested action, which is on the screen before you. Number one is to adopt the resolution of necessity, and then number two, authorize the payment of $61,000. Either it's going to go to the property owner, in which case, in the event that there's a voluntary acquisition of the property without court action, or if for some reason we can't reach agreement, then that money would be deposited with the court when the complaint is filed. So as I've said, we're hopeful that we'll be able to get a voluntary acquisition based on all the communications we've had with Mr. Wallace in the last couple days. But it's by email, and you don't really have a firm deal until they've signed the easement and it gets recorded. But it's our hope that that will happen. So I'm available for questions, and or I guess Mr. Klotzel is as well.
Any questions, Mr. Craven?
Yeah, you kind of said it, but just for anybody watching out there and to clarify really well, this is an easement. It's all for pipes underground. After the construction's over, it'll all be paved over and have exactly the same uses it has now. But if we need to access it for some reason, that we need to get into the pipes from the ground, from above, then, but they'll have full use of this same amount of property they have right now.
Yes, that's correct.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Mr. Michelle?
And Brian, the negotiations have been occurring with the LDS Church out of Salt Lake City, and not with this local church. Is that correct?
Well, there were originally, I believe, some contacts with the local representatives, and then we were later had contact with the Salt Lake City representatives. Mr. Wallace is with a law firm that's located in Salt Lake City.
Okay.
Any other questions from anybody? Okay, this is an advertised public hearing, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Would anybody like to address the council on this particular issue? With that, I will close the public hearing, and I'll ask for council discussion or motions. Mr. Tremblay,
I'm going to make a motion.
proceed.
I will move that the council adopt a resolution of necessity as revised and presented by the city attorney this evening, authorizing the commencement of eminent domain proceedings so as to acquire the easement and authorize the city manager to execute such documents as may be necessary to implement the acquisition of the easement. And number 2, authorize the payment of $61,000 to the property owner if the parties can reach agreement, or to the California State Treasurer's Office for a court litigation deposit.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the table. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. That passes unanimously.